If you like this video, click the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks and enjoy. When you think of dynasties, maybe you picture medieval castles. But in America, we build ours with oil, old money, and political resumes so polished that they reflect the perception of the people's president. Meet George Herbert Walker Bush, fighter pilot, family man, and the political world's most polite power broker. Before he was the 41st President of the United States, he was Vice President, a congressman, UN ambassador, CIA director, and an expert in politely being everywhere at once. But his story doesn't begin with politics. It begins with oil, lots of it. Bush's connection to black gold traces back to his grandfather, George H. Walker, who helped rebuild the oil fields in Baku in the 1920s. Yes, that Baku, north of Iraq, and now a geopolitical hotspot for, you guessed it, oil profits. Then came Prescott Bush, George's father, who built strong ties with Dresser Industries, a company that would later cozy up with Halliburton, aka the corporate mothership of oil-era America. Bush went into the military and had an illustrious and precarious experience, but after the war it was Yale, and then Texas. That's right, the Connecticut blue blood traded Ivy for oil rigs. He started as an equipment clerk, then moved up to sales for, you guessed it, Dresser Industries, the same company his dad was pals with. In classic entrepreneurial style, Bush co-founded Zapata Offshore, an oil drilling company with big ambitions and mediocre profits. His family gave him the startup cash. The result? Not a howling success, as one journalist delicately put it. As Bush moved into politics, the oil wasn't left behind. It came with him like a loyal golden retriever. While campaigning for Senate in 1970, Bush made a sweet deal. A loan to an old business buddy, which turned into a $500,000 profit via Fidelity Printing Company stock. Good timing? Smart investment? Divine intervention? Or just having very well-connected friends? 1989. President George H.W. Bush taps John Tower to be his Secretary of Defense. But the Senate has other ideas. Rumors of alcohol abuse, womanizing, and a reputation as a bottom pincher sink Tower's confirmation, the first cabinet-level nominee rejection since 1959. Enter Richard Bruce Cheney, not the first choice, not a fresh face, but a Washington insider with a resume stretching back to the Nixon years and a quadruple bypass under his belt. Still, the Senate confirmed him without a blink. Cheney wasn't just a placeholder. Under his watch, the U.S. invaded Panama to depose former CIA asset Manuel Noriega. Then came Desert Storm, and Saddam Hussein, another former U.S. intelligence collaborator turned public enemy. In 1995, with no corporate experience, Cheney lands a job as CEO of Halliburton, a major oilfield services company with deep ties to the Bush family. Under Cheney, Halliburton swallows Dresser Industries, once home to both Prescott and George H.W. Bush. When Cheney takes over, Halliburton is the 73rd largest Pentagon contractor. By the time he leaves, 18th. Government contracts nearly double, most coming from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Overseas contracts balloon to 65% of revenue. Federal assistance, a jump from $100 million to $1.5 billion. In the 2000 vice presidential debate, Cheney claimed, "The government had nothing to do with my success at Halliburton." But when war returned to Iraq under George W. Bush, Halliburton and its subsidiary KBR landed no-bid contracts worth billions. The Cheney connection? Too close to ignore. But when Cheney left Halliburton, he got $33 million in retirement and $30 million in stock sales. Talk about a golden parachute, he was hang gliding. Few men have shaped American politics across decades without ever running for office. James Baker is one of them. From the corridors of corporate law to the highest offices in the White House, Baker's journey is not one of fame, but of force. a force felt behind 5 presidential campaigns, in diplomatic negotiations that defined the post-Cold War world, and in the economic shifts of the Reagan era. Born in Houston, Texas, Baker began his career not in politics, but in corporate law at the powerhouse firm Andrews and Kurth. His legal acumen focused on mergers, trusts, and estates, complex matters that required quiet strategy and sharp negotiation skills. But fate had more in store. Through a mutual friend, Baker met another ambitious Texan, George Herbert Walker Bush. As it turned out, the Bush family's oil company, Zapata, had deep ties to Baker's own legal legacy. Zapata used Baker Botts, a firm founded by Baker's great-grandfather. Bush and Baker grew close, on and off the tennis court. They shared victories and vulnerabilities. When Baker's wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer, it was George Bush who stood closest, offering not just comfort, but purpose. In 1969, following his wife's death, Baker joined Bush's Senate campaign. Though Bush lost, the campaign would launch Baker's political career and cement a friendship that would shape the Republican Party for decades. The Clinton administration. In 1946, in the small town of Hope, Arkansas, a boy named William Jefferson Clinton was born. His life would begin with loss, his father tragically killed in a car crash before Bill ever drew breath. Raised by his grandparents while his mother pursued a nursing degree in New Orleans, Clinton's resilience began to take shape early. Buoyed by a network of loving relatives, young Bill found strength in the values of hard work and belief in oneself. By high school, he was already distinguishing himself, earning one of only 2 spots in Arkansas for the American Legion's Boys Nation, a mock political convention in Washington, D.C. There, under the sun-dappled trees of the Rose Garden, he would meet President John F. Kennedy. A brief moment, but one that would plant the seed of ambition deep in Clinton's heart. Soon after, he'd be moved by the thunderous words of Martin Luther King Jr., igniting a passion for service and justice that would become his public persona. As his political career maneuvered to his inevitable destiny, he tried to keep his image carefully distanced from corporate entanglements. Donations and loans told a more complex story. As governor, Clinton's campaigns were backed by loans repaid by major donors, including executives from Tyson Foods and TCBY, where Hillary Clinton served on the board. Clinton's cozy ties with Tyson's legal counsel Jim Blair and CEO Donald Tyson earned him a nickname among critics, the Chicken Man. Even Ross Perot couldn't resist the jab during the 1992 election. Despite his folksy charm, Clinton was no outsider. His administration revealed, once again, how corporate interests could find fertile ground in the Oval Office. The most glaring example came as his presidency closed. In 2001, Clinton controversially pardoned billionaire financier Mark Rich, a man who had fled the country to avoid prosecution for 51 counts of tax fraud totaling over $48 million. The motivation? Donations. Rich's ex-wife, Denise, had quietly given $400,000 to Clinton's presidential library and thousands more to Hillary's Senate campaign. And so, in the Clinton era, the revolving door spun on, fueled by ambition, deals in backrooms, and the eternal lure of money. In the world of corporticians, few ever truly escape the grip of power. Robert Rubin wasn't just a player on Wall Street, he was its architect. A man who mastered risk, built empires from corporate takeovers, and then walked through the front door of the White House. But who was this man behind the economic curtain of the Clinton administration? Born in 1938 in New York City, Robert Rubin's story begins like many others in power. With relentless education, his family moved to Miami, and Rubin eventually went on to study at Harvard and Yale. After college, Rubin joined Goldman Sachs. He dove into arbitrage, predicting market behavior and betting on mergers, takeovers, and corporate moves. Not everyone saw this as financial strategy. Some called it what it looked like: betting on corporate warfare. Rubin earned a nickname, one of the 4 horsemen of Wall Street. A master of the game during the so-called decade of greed, Rubin walked the tightrope of power without ever falling off. Well, almost. One of Rubin's hand-picked protégés, Robert Freeman, was in a $1 million trading scandal. Freeman served 4 months in prison, but left Goldman with $25 million. Still, Rubin remained untouched. methodical, calculating, and clean. So when Clinton came into power, Rubin was the perfect fit. Wall Street brilliance with Washington polish. As Treasury Secretary, Rubin had one main audience, the bond markets. He also convinced Clinton to cut spending, which would calm investors. Interest rates dropped and the stock market soared. Wall Street was thrilled. Clinton would call Rubin the greatest Treasury Secretary since Alexander Hamilton, but others weren't so sure. To critics like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, Rubin wasn't a reformer, he was a warning. Because he didn't just influence policy, he also dismantled barriers that once protected Americans from another Great Depression. He pushed the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which gut some of the protections of the Glass-Steagall Act, a move that blurred the lines between commercial and investment banking. The result? A playground for financial derivatives, high-risk financial products that trade on things like interest rates, credit defaults, and oil prices. Derivatives. Exotic, dangerous. And Rubin? He'd mastered them long before they became mainstream. He knew the risks. He understood the stakes. He helped build the world that led to the 2008 financial collapse, just years after leaving office. He proved that you don't need to break the rules to break the system, especially if you're the one rewriting them. Ron Brown was more than a political operative. He was a man who could close a deal and brought the language of Wall Street into the back rooms of Washington. Born in 1941 in Washington, D.C., Ron Brown's path to power began in Harlem. He was the son of the first black executive at the famed Cotton Club. Later, Brown would attend Middlebury College, serve in the U.S. Army, and earn a law degree from St. John's University. But it wasn't law where he made his mark. It was politics. By the late 1980s, Ron Brown had risen through the Democratic Party ranks, eventually becoming the first black chairman of the DNC, a powerful symbol, but also a practical asset. Brown wasn't just a leader, he was a fundraiser. And more than that, he was a fixer. When Bill Clinton needed support for his 1992 campaign, Brown helped bring in the money. And when Clinton won, Brown was rewarded with a top position, Commerce Secretary. At Commerce, Ron Brown was supposed to promote American business abroad, but what he really promoted was access. Brown helped U.S. corporations win billion-dollar contracts overseas, and in return, those corporations helped fund the Clinton machine. A revolving door of campaign money, corporate deals, and political favors. Critics accused him of using the Department of Commerce as a political ATM. The lines between diplomacy and donation were indistinguishable. What hasn't been told yet is that during the majority of this time frame, Brown would lobby for the brutally horrible Duvalier regime in Haiti, guilty of crimes such as imprisoning political rivals, torture, and executions of those rivals, just to name a few. Even when it was recommended that Brown no longer represent the regime, he would refuse. Brown would tragically die in a plane crash in 1996, but during his life he was an usher for both ends of the revolving door. If you liked this video, please click the like and subscribe buttons. Be sure to keep an eye out for the next compelling episode of Corporticians and Revolving Doors of Power. If you would like to buy your own copy of Corporticians and Revolving Doors of Power, visit Amazon Books, Barnes & Noble's online bookstore, or visit clevelandkelly.com. That's KELLY.com.